Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blackbar Podcast Season 2. My name is Zach Snyder, and I'm here with
Right
Caleb and Nick.
Nope. Yeah,
Nick and Caleb. Now that we're a video podcast, we have no more chance to make mistakes, and I just made our very first one, so we got to kick it off in the right way. Regardless, I'm here with Caleb Weidman and Nick Mayo, and we are so excited for you joining us today. Thank you for our returning friends who have been with our podcast in the past, our YouTube channel, our social media, or even our Discord. Shout out to the Certified Pros. Thank you so much for supporting us. We could not do what we do without you. And for those that are coming and joining us for the first time, welcome. I'm just going to give you a quick intro of who Blackbar is and what we're doing here. So Blackbar is half media ministry and half media agency that started in 2020. We've always believed that the digital media ministry is an amazing and viable form of ministry, both inside and outside of the church. We also believe that the knowledge and the techniques and the things that we've learned over all these years should be shared as free content, not stuck behind a paywall or anything like that. We want to make sure that our knowledge, the things that we've been blessed with, is free and viable to you. That's always been something that we've strived for with our ministry content. Outside of our ministry content, you can also hire us for your media needs. Shameless plug. We'd love to partner with you to help your media and marketing be the best that it can be. So hit us up if you're interested. So as far as the new season of the Blackbar Podcast, clearly for those that are watching on YouTube, you can see us visually. For the podcast, you can just continue to hear our silvery voices, as we said in the promotion. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Nick. You were going to say something about our silvery voices?
I was just going to say our voices are so silvery. I got to say, a lot of work and effort was put into making sure that all our mics sound great and everything. And we're naturally silvery voices are just like enhanced silvery voices now.
So on that note, for the Blackbar Podcast Season 2, what you can expect is that every single episode will talk about a variety of topics that continue to align with our mission to inspire, educate, and encourage Christian creatives to fulfill their calling in today's world, whatever the landscape. So if you're watching live after the fact, or if you're going to join us in our Discord, wink, wink, Discord, we'd love to hear about how you got started in this ministry. But yeah, so that's a little intro. Thanks for joining us. I can't believe that we are live and on video. I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I'm a little excited.
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Usually, I've got a script and everything, and if I mess up, which I often do, every other sentence we could just cut. We don't have that.
No more smash cuts in a live, so
we're gonna be fine. We'll figure it out.
Oh boy. Cool. Wow. So we have, like I said, we have a couple topics we're gonna hit today. Nick is gonna bring our first one. Nick, what you got for us, buddy?
First of all, it looks like my camera's kind of freaking out here, so hopefully it doesn't as we go through this, but bear with me if it does. So one of the things that's come out recently is this new update for Davinci Resolve, right? 18.5. It's been in beta since April. Mm-hmm. And I know all three of us were certified at one point in Final Cut Pro. We most of us are self-taught with Premiere. And DaVinci has kind of always been in the background as like this, this other program and stuff like that. But I have to say, at this point, watching what 18.5 has put out, I think it's going to be a real contender moving forward, especially since it's free.
It might be worth noting for someone who has absolutely no experience in the world of video. We're talking about video editing software here, right? And DaVinci Resolve, sort of the underdog, made by the same people who build Blackmagic cameras, if I remember correctly, and everything.
Yes.
Blackmagic has been the underdog since they started and have basically revolutionized everything they've touched. And honestly, I mean, DaVinci might be next in line to take the crown with some of the new features they're looking at.
Seriously.
Yeah, and I think something that's worth noting on the front end, these are NLEs, or nonlinear editors. These have been around for years. You even have something like an Avid is something that a lot of film producers use. But I think what's unique about, Nick will get into some of this, but what's unique about DaVinci is that it's free, which, as far as I'm aware, that's the only free present day piece.
I mean, by Windows Movie Maker, you can go crazy or whatever, but with an actually fully featured thing. So Nick, why don't you tell 18.5 just launched? What are some of the things that are worth talking about?
All right, so some of the key features are multiple cut page improvements. So I was not sure how recently you guys have hopped in DaVinci, but it has multiple different pages for different parts of your editing process. So like there's the media page, there's the cut page, there's the edit page. So they've made some improvements to that. There is AI subtitling, and there's also AI text-based editing.
Not the AI.
I know, right?
We talk a lot about that today.
Yes. There's a couple other things in there, new Fusion stuff. Fusion is kind of like their version of After Effects. Something that has me really excited for client work is remote monitoring improvements. So one thing that you can do is you can be working on a project through DaVinci's cloud, which is, by the way, free. You can send your client a live feed of the video. So you can be like,
so
hey.
Now they can work over my shoulder from hundreds of miles away. That's great.
Client work just got so much worse.
I also think it'd be great for like something like us as Blackbar. Not saying that we're changing to DaVinci yet, but like Zach being in Maryland, if we're working on a project and you need to see what it's looking like, instead of me having to export it or screen share over Discord, I can just say, hey, open up your app on your iPad, and there you go. We can watch the video together. And by the way, DaVinci has a version of itself for iPad. So you can edit in DaVinci on your iPad. I think that's pretty cool. Nuts.
That's pretty cool.
So let me show you guys those two things that I think are really crazy. Let me pull up DaVinci here.
And while you're pulling that up, Nick, one thing I was thinking real quick is some of these features might be locked behind the DaVinci paid version, but it's worth noting that Final Cut and the DaVinci paid version are the exact same, I believe, in the same ballpark of price.
Yes.
Both of those are a one-time payment. Premiere, you can only get it right now through, I think, Creative Cloud, right? Unless you have one of those classic CDs that you remember. You guys remember the disc CDs?
Yeah, I still have mine.
Oh yeah, I still have an old Premiere. But yes, it is worth noting about that. The cool thing is, if you buy any kind of like Blackmagic gear, usually there will also come a free copy of the paid.
That's how Nick and I both have our
licenses.
Yes. So if your church is using Blackmagic stuff, definitely find those boxes that they probably shoved in some hallway and see if there's a free version for you to use. But
it's nuts. You can have a like $300 to $400 program depending on the year for free, and those things are perpetually like for the future as far as DaVinci is concerned right now. So that one-time thing will get you that pro program forever.
So, Nick, I see you have pulled up our handsome friend Trevor on your timeline.
Yes, I in retrospect, perhaps I should have talked to Trevor that he would be somewhat featured here. But this is actually a project that we put together as Blackbar Productions for a client, Sabbath Coffee.
Shameless self-promotion once again.
Hey, we didn't need to ask him for his permission to be on here. We're giving him shameless self-promotion. So that's enough of a trade-off.
Sabbath Coffee. It's the
best. I figured that would sweeten that a little bit. But all right, so we're here in DaVinci. We see a clip of Trevor here in DaVinci as well. What I'm going to do is we're going to transcribe this video. So up here in this I think this is the master bin. I'm going to call it a bin for now because let's just make something really clear from the beginning. I started learning DaVinci like 4 days ago. I know Premiere pretty darn well, and I'm going to use some terms between the two that probably should not be shared. But in this bin is the actual video, the entire video of this episode that we created for their YouTube channel. If I right-click on the video and go down to audio transcription and hit transcribe, it's going to transcribe the entire video. Now, I did this ahead of time in preparation because, one, it takes a few minutes to do it, and two, I didn't want to lose frames on my camera, but I guess that's happening anyway. So you can see that there is a window here. I'm going to bring this down just beneath the preview viewer, where it has the whole transcript. This right here is this little ... is a pause. So if this was like a recording of your pastor or something, these ... pauses, you can go over to the right hand, the right top corner of this window, and remove all silent portions. We're not going to do this for this, but I mean, imagine being able to take every single pause.
That's great.
Delete. Jeez. Isn't it? A great feature. Now, Caleb, I know you worked on this project as well. Do you remember a certain phrase at all that Trevor would say during these videos? I'm trying to think if you'll remember it.
I don't remember. It's been a little while.
It's been a bit. But he would always say something went wrong, right?
Oh, sure.
Right. Now, what if let's create a scenario where they want to grab that clip real quick, throw it on social media. You have 30 minutes to do it. Can you tell me where in this project I could find that? You might say the end. It takes some time and scrubbing, right?
I might hit the search button that's right up there.
Very astute observation, Caleb.
Oh my god.
I'll type in the word wrong, hit enter, and it came up with two possibilities. Something at the beginning here, but the last one, immediately I'm able to find that. And so now I like, okay, this is the clip that I want. Here's the thing. If I highlight this text, right, this creates a clip. I can go down here, make a sub clip. It will create another clip in my media bin here.
Jeez.
I know. That same highlighted segment, I can do an insert into this project, or I can do an append edit and put it at the end. I don't know if you guys saw that with this being here, but so if I wanted to stick this
crazy.
Yeah. Append, insert would have been at the end because of the playhead went to the end. But
Sure.
like, that's pretty phenomenal. Text-based editing. Other AI is going to kill it later, but right now this is such a great thing because if you're doing a talking head video, you can find specifically what you're looking for and put it immediately in there. I'm literally thinking about using this for when we create social media content from this podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact I don't know for certain yet if I can do it in the iPad version, but I mean, like, that's huge.
That's crazy.
So anyway, text-based editing. Let's talk about. Let me undo some of these edits because that's pretty bad. It really destroyed this. Let's talk about subtitles real quick. And so if I highlight this clip, I think I go timeline, create subtitles from audio. Now we have all kinds of languages. We're going to pick English because that was what Trevor was speaking. There's a caption preset for Netflix. There are other things we got here. We're going to keep going through this a little bit quicker here. But it's going to start creating the subtitles. Now, one thing I didn't do before I started this particular portion, the reason I picked this video is because Trevor's talking with a bag of coffee in his mouth, and it's really difficult to understand him, right? So, yeah, my camera is going to drop some frames as it's analyzing these things.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Just a good
the Jeopardy soundtrack to be playing in the background.
So while that's loading, I guess if you don't mind my asking a question or proposing something, I think one of the jokes that we all are very aware of is that in the NLE world, you're always fighting over who is the better NLE processor, right?
Right.
Yes.
I mean, we're all certified in Final Cut Pro X. I'm still a Final Cut Pro fanboy. However, I recognize that there's not as many significant advancements that have come out that keep it to quite compete with Premiere and Davinci. I love Final Cut. I recognize that. I'm curious what advantages so far you guys have seen. Nick, you've been playing with this a little bit, that Davinci has over Premiere or vice versa.
So we did actually a community event a while back, a Fourth Friday on our Discord server, where I taught about how to do this effect in Premiere Pro. And at that lesson, I basically said, DaVinci's great because it's free, but it can't do this, right? Yeah. And I know you mentioned this earlier, Zach, and I will probably some post-show thing I'll do and prove whether I'm true or false in this. I think these features are free.
Jeez.
I think they come with the free version.
Insane.
Yeah.
So it looks like it loaded.
Yep. Let me see if I'm sending you guys my audio real quick.
You are. Yep, I heard it.
Good. All right. So we're going to play this real quick, and we'll see how good of a job it did. If it did a good job.
Today, I'm not using hands. I brought with me this wonderful Costa Rica coffee that Shiloh Coffee has on stock. And
Shiloh Coffee.
Right.
Yep.
Not too bad.
Not too bad for having
the fact that he's got
thing of coffee
in
your mouth.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
And I can double click on that one where it says Silo or Shiloh, go in here and change that to
There you go.
Sabbath, right?
Okay.
Boom. It's
There you
super great. Going to be great for social media and all kinds of stuff. And one thing I didn't mention is you can export the text file of this video.
Jeez.
Or sorry, the text file of the subtitles for like
crazy.
website, blog, stuff like that.
Wow.
So I guess I'm sure there's more features of this, but we've got a lot of topics to talk about today. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. But I know one of the big things we want to talk about regarding this is, okay, you are someone who is working at a church, or maybe volunteering at a church. Your church wants to do some video. You're tired of iMovie. You're tired of Windows Movie Maker or whatever other garbage app you've picked up from the App Store, and you want to move to a professional platform. The big three, obviously, we've already talked about it several times today, being DaVinci, being Final Cut Pro, being Premiere. Do we have advice on where we would point someone in these programs? Obviously, we all have our favorites, right? But for someone who's just getting started, what would you guys say?
Zach, I'll let you answer that one first.
You're gonna let me at that one first. Okay, well, like I said, I'm a Final Cut fanboy. I love it, especially if you're an Apple user. Final Cut is really what's the best way to say it? It's really clean. It's really easy to use, especially if you have experience in what's the base editor that comes with Apple products? iMovie. Yeah, if you know iMovie is a really easy transition. I think it's a really clean and intuitive process. It is a magnetic timeline. I personally work around the magnetic timeline with a little bit of a trick that I use that I don't have time to go into now, and I love it. But the biggest thing is, yes, one, it's Apple exclusive, and then two, it's primarily centered around other Apple products of the same name. So Apple Motion, which is the less popular After Effects, does coincide with it. And there's a lot of great features that people are creating in the like the default space of like you can get generators and all that jazz for it. I will say, for that reason, it doesn't necessarily coordinate well with Adobe products, which right now Adobe products, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, those are dominating in my opinion, Caleb, Nick, you guys can back me up, but Adobe products are dominating the graphics and animation space right now. Not that Final Cut can't work with them, but it doesn't have the same, I'll let this be like the ramp off, it doesn't have the same ingenuity of Premiere. I don't know who's taking Premiere, but I pass it off to you.
Caleb, you want to?
Yeah, I'll do Premiere. Yeah. So I think when it comes to Premiere, I think personally it's going to be the most feature rich out of all of the programs.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Adobe's
right now, at least
at this moment in time. As of 7/28/2023, it definitely seems to be the most feature rich. It's also definitely going to be the most expensive. It doesn't have as much upfront of a cost, but you got to lock into a subscription, which if you didn't know, Adobe, you may pay for it monthly, but they're only going to let you out of that subscription one time a year, the same month. You're signing up for 1 year, which sucks. So
you can't use the application without that sign-in active,
right?
Which is
But you also get the entire Creative Cloud. So you get Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop and Illustrator, InDesign, the whole suite. Which, if you're someone who is wearing a lot of hats and playing in all those different fields, if you can afford it, I honestly think it is vastly worth the price. I wouldn't be able to do anything what I do. But if you're literally just getting started and maybe you don't even know what your church's investment into video is going to be, I don't know, $30 or whatever it is a month might not be the play.
For sure. Nick, you want to take us home?
Yep. DaVinci is probably your best bet when it comes to like. Am I lagging? Okay.
You are lagging. Yeah, I would close DaVinci or anything else you have going up over there.
Yeah, I just did. Let me take a pause here and restart my audio.
Is it a live stream without some technical difficulties?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, come on.
How's this? We better?
Oh, are you back? You seem to be better. Yes. I'll switch back to you now. Yeah. Okay,
thanks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that was a audio engine thing there. But yeah, DaVinci, I think, is your best bet for you're just getting into video and you need something that's really good for cheap price. You just can't beat free.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I will say one final thought that I'm thinking of, not just in like you as a casual church media person, but also most job like resumes or most job applications that pertain to video, usually Premiere is the first default video thing that people will ask about. It's very rare that I see. Sometimes it'll be knowledge of NLEs, but usually Premiere is the top of the list that current jobs are asking for. I think Davinci will pretty quickly climb up there alongside of Premiere. I don't know if Final Cut will make that case unless they're opening it to kind of the person that's coming in to decide what NLE they're using. But Premiere and I think Davinci are probably going to be the top competitors as far as like looking for a job in the digital space. So worth mentioning.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the digital space, let's get into the next topic for today. Well, I don't know if you guys have paid attention to what's going on in the social media world, but there's this thing called Threads that came out. It came out on July 6th. It was Meta's competitor to Twitter, because we all, I hope that if you're watching this, you have some awareness of what Twitter is. Meta kind of launched a counter idea to that. And Meta launched the first week with about 100 million user signups in less than a week during launch, which is massive for a brand new application. Now, I think a lot of that with the Instagram crossover, the capabilities of Meta allowing you to bring over followers and follows from Instagram is huge.
It's a real
and also you can't technically delete your Threads account without deleting your Instagram account. So, I mean,
I did see that.
Now, a big tension that we've seen is as of this week, as of when I was reading one of the articles that was referenced in the lower third, we've seen a 70% decline in users since the July 7th spike, which sounds massive. But I will say in this article as well, Zuckerberg and his team said that Meta's not concerned, as they believe Threads is still a work in progress with many features to come. People aren't jazzed that Threads didn't launch with more of a wide feature base, which I believe is part of the decline. But I think that it's going to kind of come down to Meta to see how successful it is in the next couple of months. It's worth noting that any new app on the market would love 100 million user signups. They'd be thrilled to see that, even with the decline in numbers. So the success will come down to Meta. Now, alongside Threads, of course, Threads being kind of a competition for Twitter, we've seen this week, we were prepared to just talk about Threads today, but we saw this week on July 24th, Elon Musk full sent into rebranding Twitter closer to his grand vision for this social media app. So Twitter is now X, which is made seriously apparent in the progressive conversion of a new logo, a new website. They're deleting the visuals of the Twitter bird all over the space. Tweeting is still a verbiage that's being used, but we even saw the letters being taken down at the California HQ in the middle of the street from Twitter. So he's very serious and very moving forward with this idea. Musk and his team continues to move the platform further away from the original purpose of Twitter, just kind of like a text-based communication app, more toward an app that can do everything. We've heard Elon talk a lot about an app that he wants his app to do everything that you would ever need to do, so you don't leave his app and you spend all his time there. But he wants this everything app to cover video sharing, streaming, podcasting, long form messaging, shopping, financial management, calendar scheduling, all that jazz is stuff that he wants to do. So this is X. We don't see most of those features right now. However, we do see those features are on the horizon. And then finally, the day after Twitter changed to X, we saw TikTok, the old TikTok, released a text post.
This is exhausting.
This is exhausting.
Things happened all at
July 25th, we saw a text post function, which you can create content on TikTok in the same way you would create a video, but focused on text posting. And it can include a lot of the features like the visuals, the effects. You can add some music, I believe, to these text posts. That was launched. And while it's not like explicitly clear that this is a competitor to Twitter, I think it's clear that this could compete in this kind of text post space. Now, of course, for anyone watching, TikTok still has the tension that ByteDance, which is the company that owns it, which is a Chinese company, is still facing backlash that many believe the company could be providing user data to the Chinese government. There's been a lot of tension around that. We even have seen Montana, a state in the United States, completely ban the use of this application. So something else to watch out for as these things are here. So quick comparison on Diaz. I know I've been talking for a lot about this. Like Caleb said, it's an exhausting backlash of all these social media sites. Threads is free, has a 500 character limit on the text posts. X, we still see Twitter, a version of the Twitter Blue paid, which allows you to post without limit. We also have the free one that has a limit, and then their tweets itself can do 280 character limit. And then finally, the new TikTok function is free, of course, with TikTok, with 1,000-word character limit. So lots of similar. I mean, it sounds like a lot of different things, but they're similarly competing in this space. So the main question that I want to ask with all of that, well, maybe we should take a breath first.
Yeah, that was a lot.
There's a lot going on.
The main question for our media and church people, I think we saw this in 2020. We see so many platforms, and it's really easy to get exhausted and discouraged of like, I have to be at all these places. So my question is, should churches even be using or competing or keeping up with these platforms right now? So that's the question I open to the chat.
Mm-hmm. Nah.
Oh my gosh.
So, okay, that was a lot. So we've got Threads and X.com, I guess. You know, genius Elon just throwing away all the brand identity that he bought for $40 billion or whatever. It was fine. He's a genius, I'm sure. I promise it's going to work out.
You better be careful, Caleb. You're making some of our audience upset.
I wonder what Caleb's opinion is on this. So listen, Threads, X,
and TikTok now getting into the same like text-only space, which makes a lot of sense. If Twitter is literally on fire like it's been for the past 6 months or so, it makes sense that there's other competitors that are trying to come in and sweep the thing. Now, when it comes to like just talking about Twitter 6 months ago, how many churches did you know that were like having a lot of success on Twitter and like reaching their community on Twitter? Not very common. There are certainly some, but I'd argue that the majority of them were like individual pastors who had sort of an influence online. I think that Twitter and text posting in general is something that you get a lot of more success out of being an individual rather than an organization or a page. So if your pastor is particularly, tech savvy and into the whole thing, then I think it might be worth communicating that on there. But I think the question is why? Like to what end? Like what is the goal of all of the posting or the work that you might be doing on there? And
I mean, that's always the question if you've listened to us at any period of time, you would know that's always the question we're asking when it comes to using just about anything. And social media is no exception. Why are you using it? So Caleb, I know we have 3 questions that we always default to. Who is your audience? What do we want them to feel? And why should they care about us? I think that's no different in these social spaces. Right. Why do you want to be there? And do these things coincide with your mission? And do you have a way to stand out that is authentic, that is real, and that is actually impactful and not just adding to the noise that we are already seeing?
Right. I think primarily speaking, Twitter or X, maybe less X. Forget X. You don't need X. Threads. These are, and even especially TikTok, I say, are very much online. They're online social media platforms, but they're for reaching online people, as opposed to something where Facebook and Instagram, where you can create more of a localized group based on the people around you following or whatever. These platforms are better for reaching people who are probably not going to live anywhere near you and probably are far away. So if your church is building like an online evangelism strategy, trying to reach people that are online and they're going to stay online and they are not making the commute to your church every Sunday, and you have the ability to serve those people properly, I think that those would absolutely be platforms worth investing in. If not, I don't know. I feel like your attention might be better served elsewhere.
I'm curious. It looks like I'm curious what you think, Nick, but I have another thought if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, so when Threads came out, day one, I hopped on and I was trying to experience all of what Threads had to offer. And
I mean, we did too a little bit.
Yeah.
If you want some spicier posts, you can go over to our Threads account.
Yes, that's very true. Blackbar did hop in on Threads. First day was like decent. Everyone seemed to really like it, but like, I'm still trying to interact on Threads and I'm just not seeing interaction, right? And so I don't know how many people are viewing what I'm posting. And so my thought is like, you know, we very much preach that there is a digital space, right? There's digital nations and stuff like that. But when I look at Threads, I don't know if it has a population. That nation, I don't think it's populated right now.
Do you think that's a yet? Do you think that's they don't have a population yet, or do you?
I think it's too early to tell at this point. I think at this moment it's gonna be like we have to wait and see. You said that they're rolling out more features. Those features may determine what that looks like.
Yeah, I didn't find any like timelines on those features either, or specifics about those features, because we know that there's a lot. Like just looking at Twitter by itself, we know that Threads, if it's trying to compete, is missing a lot of just, let's say, the core heart of Twitter and what it's supposed to be. If Threads is aiming to compete with that specifically, there's a lot of things that Threads needs to do to get there.
And I think it's not operating in a vacuum. Like we talked about the two other competitors. One main one, TikTok is doing it basically on the side. If Twitter somehow gets a new owner and starts doing really fantastic and catches back up to where it was, I think Thread will become redundant really quick. Obviously, it gained a lot of users, but still, comparatively to the user base of Twitter, it's not going to compare. So if they can somehow put it together, I wouldn't put money on it. Then I don't think Threads will be in it for the long haul. But because I'm not going to put money on Twitter, I think it'd be safe to put money on Threads.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and maybe we can like land out this topic on this thought. I think, like I said in the kind of the intro to this section, I think 2020 is a perfect example of when pastors and teams and media folks looked at all these places that they weren't on and felt that they should be, and they lost their collective minds and health, mental health, trying to catch up. I feel like maybe I could be wrong in this. I'm open to what you guys have to say. I feel like it's so important to decide where you want to be and not to follow the hype, unless you really truly believe like you need to be there. Like, I don't know if I don't personally think, like, if your church has an Instagram and a Facebook right now, and you're trying to decide whether you want to be on Threads specifically feels like, unless if you have a person that knows the voice, the vision, the message, and the calling of your church, and can
the culture of Threads,
they can speak confidently. Yeah, they can speak confidently in the voice of your church, and they can be present on a digital community. I just don't know if it's worth the time and investment for a church to do that. Now, you guys did say, like, we've seen a lot of most churches. Yeah. We've seen a lot of like lead pastors, or like, I mean, influencers. I know we hate to use that word. We see a lot of pastors who are very tech savvy, who are very present. They are arguably the culture generator of their church. If they have the capacity to be on Threads, then I think that could be a good opportunity. So all that to say, I feel like from my perspective, where most churches are, especially smaller churches, if you don't have a full-time social media manager, and if you do, that's already spending all their time on these other platforms, I don't see Threads as a super great opportunity yet.
Yeah, I think just sort of touching on that point, I know John Mark just posted in the comments, is there a quality over quantity game to be argued? Absolutely. I think there's a quality over quantity. You're going to be on every single platform, posting 4 times a day on every single one. It's going to be trash. Even if we as like professionals were doing it full time, it would still be trash. You have to, figure out where the best bang for your buck is going to be. No church is working with unlimited resources, even the big ones. And
if I can throw a really interesting point into here that I've been thinking about, like, I think we are moving away from the day and age where churches have a social media manager. I think we're going to have to start, and this is only going to be available in some churches, but we're going to have to start thinking about who's our Instagram manager, who is our Twitter manager, X, because there are just so many now, and each has a different culture and language and all these things. It's a lot to ask someone to be an expert in all of them at this point.
Yeah. Yep. So advice for the small church: find what's most important that coincides with your church's culture, with your pastor's vision, and try to see if you can put the most effort there. I think consistency and quality of posting is going to be more important than being everywhere. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Next topic.
We're moving on. We're moving on. Okay. That conversation's dead and over, just like Twitter.
Right. Yes.
Jeez.
All right. This is going to be a little bit of a strange, and I apologize. I'm not going to be able to share my screen to show you the article on this one. I'm getting some weird stuff with my screen share today, but we'll figure that out. It's technical problems on a premiere. It's to be expected. But we're going to be talking a little bit about the strikes going on in Hollywood, specifically with the WGA, which is the Writers Guild, and SAG-AFTRA, which is the union for actors specifically. And it may not sound incredibly obvious how this could be connected to our world, but I think there's some relevant takeaways that we could talk about out of it. So if you haven't heard, if you've been living under a rock or just maybe not tuned in with
Caleb, what's going on with these numbers and letters that you're saying?
So the people who write the TV shows and movies that we like, and maybe the ones we don't, and the people who act in them have gotten together. They have unions. Almost all of Hollywood is unionized, and they are not incredibly happy with the deal that they're getting from the producers and the directors who put these films together. They've tried to come to an agreement on some terms. Those terms have not been met, sometimes very laughably not met. And so they're going on strike. That's how it works, collective action. So specifically, the writers are looking for a handful of things. Right now, apparently, there is a sort of a minimum wage that the Writers Guild have argued for, and 49% of all writers in the WGA are making the minimum wage and no more, which is a little bit ridiculous. They're looking for better residuals on streaming specifically. So usually you'd expect when
streaming's been massive, man.
Right. When if I write a TV show and the TV show goes on Netflix, I should be paid in perpetuity for every time those get views.
Or if I make a movie and that movie skips theaters because of COVID, and then I lose out on that, like how's that work?
Apparently, often the writers and even actors are not aware of the views that their work is getting, and are not being compensated in proportion to the amount of views they are getting. Back in TV show, when a show gets syndicated or something, that it would work out. In the world of streaming, it's very different. They're also the writers are specifically worried about understaffing problems. Often shows are hiring less people than should be. So a very small group of writers are writing for multiple seasons. But the big one, I think, that's sort of relevant to stuff we're talking about in this world is the dangers of artificial intelligence. The writers and I should clarify, should be worried about producers utilizing artificial intelligence either as supplement to additional writers, or sort of replacement for, like, instead of having 15, I'm going to have 5 writers and then use AI, or outright replacing it, or rewriting particular scenes according to the work that usually would be a writer's job. They'd be handing off to AI. The actors are arguing for similar things, but a little bit different. The actors have not seen major pay increases, at least in a minimum level, for a number of years now. That the pay increases have not stayed up with inflation, so they're asking for that. They're looking also for better residuals on streaming. It's a bit of a theme. And also artificial intelligence. I don't like the use of artificial intelligence in this context because I do not believe that it is accurate. But essentially, there's this new program that sort of producers have been talking about, the idea of bringing in an actor for a single day, full body scanning them and doing whatever, and then using their likeness in the future in perpetuity to have as a background actor, or like in a crowded scene or anything like that.
Certainly they'll pay them well for that, right, Caleb?
No, so they would pay them for this single day where they, get their body scanned or whatever, not get paid any further for their image being used. And also, I think maybe even more dangerously, not allowed to give consent on where their likeness is used into the future.
Yes.
So people can use you and make you look like you're doing any sort of thing. And you never signed up or even knew that you were going to be in the thing. I think all of those are big deals. I think it's reasonable for the WGA and SAG-AFTRA to be striking in the circumstances. No, everybody has sort of different feelings about these things, but I wanted to talk about a couple of things today. Number one, I know we're going to talk about AI in its entirety in our next sort of big topic today. But when it comes to the writers being concerned about losing their work to AI, and specifically the actors losing, especially background actors, losing their work to, it's not AI, it's computer generated images. It's not necessarily a new thing, but maybe even to a bigger extent. Like, how do we feel about those realities? If you've been if you've been in the space for any amount of time, those are very real dangers, even in the prosumer tools that we have access to.
Yeah
Jeez.
Yeah, man, I imagine some people might be thinking that, you know, this stuff doesn't have a lot to do with church, but I you know, this technology is coming and it will be at our fingertips soon. There will be a day where you never even have to get your lead pastor in front of a camera. You'll type up a script, throw it into a program. The digital version of your pastor will say it in whatever tone you tell him to say it. And your computer will spit out a video where your pastor never even had to leave his office to make.
I think
that future is somewhere down the road.
Perhaps even scarier to me. Your pastor doesn't need to hire a video person to do it. He puts his own script.
He does it himself.
Makes the video himself. And why are we around anymore?
Sure. Yeah, you know, I see that as the case, and my thought is like, this is where that concern is you know, being handled right now. Before we're the ones facing the repercussions of the advancements of AI and jobs, the Writers Guild and the actors, they're the ones where that's getting hit first, because that's just where the technology is available. So somewhere down the road, you know, the Christian creatives in churches are going to have to deal with it, probably maybe a decade from now. Who knows, maybe even sooner. But you know, we should care about what's happening here, because it is going to affect us further down the road.
Yeah, I think without getting into, because like Caleb hinted, our next segment, what this video is named after, we'll get more into AI, pros and cons. I think specifically on this topic, I think the biggest thing that worries me is the total unregulation of the use of what's called AI across the digital space. We're seeing its implications with these strikes. Like, those are very real implications, but there's so many other implications we're not seeing. Like, I believe that I saw a promo, and I'm not going to say who it was for, but they used the likeness of Nicki Minaj's face and Tom Holland's face, I believe, as a part of a digital promotion for their project. It was like a joke, but like the fact that, like, I don't know anything about this company.
I would imagine.
I would imagine that they did not contact Tom Holland and Nicki Minaj's agents to be like, can we use their likeness to promote this product? I would be very surprised if they did that, because it looks like it's an up and coming product. That kind of stuff is just super worrisome for me.
I don't disagree with you, but also I'm like adding on to the fact that, like, I can set up my camera in a public setting and just hit record as people walk through the mall, and and I'm allowed to use that for anything. I don't need to contact any of those people, right? So like I agree that legal lines need to be drawn in this, but it's not going to be easy to draw those.
No, it's not.
And I don't necessarily trust, you know, the 75-year-old geezers in Hollywood or in DC to make those decisions.
Well, I think we're also already seeing, like, even voice, the voice manipulation. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen the thing that's been going around where it's like Donald Trump and Biden and Obama and George W. Bush playing like Call of Duty together. COD. Like, it's very very funny and it's amusing. But but how realistic the voices sound because of the AI generation, like. Oh, we've already opened the box. And I don't think I mean, like I said, we'll get into this. I don't think any of us is necessarily against AI as a tool, but when it comes to this stuff where we're just absolutely like things are being drawn, it's starting with the writers and the actors, and I think we're going to continue to have to see some version of this line drawn down the line. How long will it take to get there? I don't know.
I think it's also worth talking about specifically for the actors and the whole like body scan and put it there. If the actors don't consent to that, there are alternatives. So I know, like, one of the big ones that I'm definitely aware of. Let me make sure that this is displaying properly. Of course it's not. Now it is. Is Unreal Engine's metahumans.
Oh yeah.
These are not real people. They are fake people that you can generate in Unreal Engine. And for the sake of background actors, where you have a crowd of thousands of people or something like that, this is more than enough. You don't need real people scans for anything. You could just generate this out of the blue. I think it's extremely cool technology. I've played around with it myself, but we'd be kidding ourselves if this isn't going to have real implications on the acting industry, especially for back. So even if they don't get sent, for getting paid one day to use their likeness, they'll just use fake people instead. To me, I'm a little worried about the fact that it might be just a losing battle all around.
So guys, for churches, what's the thing that we're really honing in here for churches? Because so far, I don't know how many churches have like actors and that kind of stuff and acting guilds, but like for churches, like if you're, I don't think there's a lot we can do outside of joining in the strikes if you're in those areas. What should a church person be watching, a church media folk be watching out for in this?
I think, we'll talk a little bit more in the AI section, but if you're not understanding how AI is working and learning to use the tools as they come available, you're going to be in trouble in a couple of years. You really have to stay on top of what these options are available, at least in your chosen field, whatever that is. Because if you can communicate with AI bot and make it generate what you want better than any random person, a stranger can, then that is going to give you an advantage in staying in the industry that you're in.
So maybe what I'm hearing is be informed. Don't overload yourself in a way that you spiral out and lose all hope because AI is coming for your job. But be informed, and also I think there's value in forming your own personal convictions and moral opinions about this topic, and even informing your lead pastor or your pastoral staff to help them understand how this is a tool. And you want to avoid the moral implications of it as a church. So,
But also, if I might maybe say something that might get me canceled in.
Oh boy,
that's a big. That's a big.
Do we
statement.
have that
that's
really stop Caleb from saying a thing button?
Yeah, I do. That's on my side. You guys don't have it.
So, I don't know if it's gonna be that bad. We'll see. What do
you see.
We're talking about unions that, I believe some of these unions have existed for like 100 years now. I think the SAG-AFTRA was in the 30s or whatever, that felt like they were being consistently taken advantage of in terms of wages, in terms of hours, and decided that the best way to protect themselves from that in the end was collective action.
Yeah.
And I can't help but to notice some parallels in a industry of people to whom we may belong that are often taken advantage of in terms of overtime hours, in terms of I guess pay in general, in terms of expectation for turnaround, and there's only so much we can do. I mean, certainly we could just be better Christians and shut up and do our jobs. But there has to be some kind of line. And I personally very strongly believe that there is no work so important, including kingdom work, as to justify the exploitation of its workers. And it may not be a terrible idea for someone, probably not us, I don't know if we have the time, to have a conversation about what would a church media union look like.
There it is. So that's the landing. That's the landing point you're getting at. A media for church media folks, huh?
A union.
A union. Yeah. Sorry.
I don't think it would be unrealistic to have a conversation. And obviously, I'm not here saying we need to protect ourselves. Everybody needs to get double our pay and all that kind of stuff. We understand we're working in the kingdom. We're going to make more money if we worked outside of it. The pay is not the issue. It is the overtime. It's the expectation of turnaround times. And I believe that some of that, collective action historically is the vehicle in which this stuff gets fixed in the long term.
Sure.
And certainly, we can all grin and bear it, but I don't see an end to this road unless there's, a bigger conversation at play. And I understand that's not going to make me a lot of pastor friends. But
well,
I think it's a conversation with that.
Caleb, it's interesting you mentioned it because this is something I have been silently considering for the past years. because the implications are pretty incredible. I mean, let's just say if I can project this idea of what it would look like, there becomes a church creative union, right? And so if you are creative and you have a creative job in the church, you are part of this union, right? So that's like worship leaders, that's video, live broadcast, text, social media, all of that, right? And if the union decides, hey, we're going to go on strike, that's not just one church. That's every church, unless the union specifically changes that.
Realistically, it would have to be per denomination, because the union has to engage with a particular entity, right? So maybe there's like a Baptist, creative union, or evangelist, stuff like that.
And
but I don't know. I feel like I've had worse ideas.
So I do want to provide like a little, like, we could probably let this be a transition if we want into our main topic. But I do want to say a counter thought is, I think the biggest proponent of an idea that you'll get is church media folks should not be doing what they're doing solely for the money. And I think if they refuse to do kingdom work because of money, that's going to be a really, really difficult place to be in, that I feel like could put church media folk in an even worse rap within the church community. I'm not saying accountability and fair wage is not necessary for people who work in a church, because the reality is that many, many people, their entire vocation, that's what vocational ministry is for, that they're getting their entire livelihood comes from the church. But I think the hardest part is it ultimately about the money for those folks? And I think that would be a really hard tension if this were to ever become a reality.
Yeah, I don't think it can be an argument that's entirely about money. And honestly, if we focused on something like that, then we would price media people out of a lot of churches that just literally cannot afford, that have like a bivocational pastor or something like that. Yeah, I think my concerns would be more about, like, if your media guy is working unexpected overtime hours, then either that person be paid for those hours, or those hours are coming out of the following week. There should be regulations in place for expected turnaround times. How many people are required to do specific kinds of jobs. I think it's just about safeguarding, that relationship, not necessarily for a total amount of money. If you agree on a pay per hour or whatever when you take the job, I'm not worried about people governing themselves in that department. But making sure that the church isn't taking advantage of those people in those positions, exploiting those workers. I think exploitation of any kind in the workplace, especially from churches. If there's anybody who should be taking care of their people. And I feel relatively blessed having, the church jobs that I've had are relative. Like, I feel good about those relationships, but I know a lot of people have not had that experience. And I think perhaps collective action might be a route to solving some of those problems.
Could be.
I do wonder. Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, there is something related there that I should correct myself on. Something I said earlier about, like, the union being old churches, and like what there is a precedent already set from the actors and writers strike. I believe it's A24 films.
Yes, A24. Yep.
Yes,
100%.
They are still doing stuff with that production house because they've agreed to the terms and conditions. So it wouldn't be just all churches, right? If there was a strike, if your church is like, yeah, we agree with that, then so it wouldn't just like cripple the whole thing, right? And certainly that's definitely pushback, because like if the media guys go on strike, the gospel may not be preached, and that's a big deal, especially for a church.
But I'll say it, said it before, I'll say it again. There's no work so important, including kingdom work, as to justify the exploitation of its workers. Right. The exploitation of people should not be necessary to spread the gospel.
Sure. And if
it is necessary, we need to build new systems.
Yeah.
Sure. I often wonder if it's worth the. Sorry, Zach. Yeah, I often wonder if it worth, or is the more lives we save down the road worth the bodies we leave behind?
Sheesh, Nick. To land out this topic, I will say, Nick, I'm glad you brought up A24, because of a small independent studio who won 9 Oscars last year because the productions they were putting out can handle every single one of the requests the union is asking for. I don't see why Hollywood can't.
Did they do Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yes, they did.
Yes, they
Everything
did.
Everywhere
That is
All
the
at
studio.
Once got
Yep.
8 of the 9.
I haven't seen it yet. Please don't spoil it.
We can't,
I know I need to.
in an official church capacity, recommend Everything Everywhere All at Once, but in a personal capacity, I loved Everything Everywhere All at Once.
My guy, there is.
I cried every time. Every time.
There are certain denominations that will not approve of that film.
Yes.
There are a lot of denominations that will not approve of the film.
Quite a few. Nick, you haven't seen it. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a denomination.
Nick hasn't
that's going
seen
to
it?
approve that.
I haven't seen it. So here's
Listen,
the thing.
can we? I know we're not allowed to legally stream
we're
that,
gonna
but can we spend one of our Blackbar Fridays watching Everything Everywhere All at
I
Once?
think we need to stop the podcast right now and just.
We need to stop it right now.
We're gonna
Yeah, I know. So here, I know this is not on the docket, but yeah, the story behind it is I wanted to go see it in theaters because they throw all those movies back into theaters when they're nominated for Oscars or if they win the Oscar, something like that. And it just never happened. I just never got around to going to watch it. And so I don't want to just watch it on some streaming thing on some random moment. I want to spend the time to sit down and appreciate it.
If we were closer,
as art.
I would drive to Michigan right now and we would have a movie night for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Hey man, you make it a thing. Make it a thing.
Okay.
I said if we were closer to
We've
Michigan.
got other stuff to talk about.
Caleb, what's our big topic for the day? You already launched us off on the AI thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you got? What do you got?
We know what we're talking about today. We're talking about artificial intelligence.
I mean, we wrote the
Blackbar's-
title for this stream.
Yeah,
I mean, we know.
Blackbar's been gone for a little while, and in the meantime, artificial intelligence has really exploded onto the scene. And a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on how it should be used and if it should be used and in what areas it should be used. And I think it'd be interesting to have a full conversation about our experiences with AI so far and maybe how we might recommend churches be looking at it in the future.
Yeah. So I think the very first thing, Caleb, you make this point really well, if you don't mind going into it. We say AI. Is that even an accurate terminology to be using in this realm of things we're talking about today?
Right. So AI is definitely a buzzword, and there's a lot of companies that are just using the word AI to make it sound cool whenever things happen automatically, and that's certainly not true. Artificial intelligence is a technology that is built on neural networks, which, for the sake of simplifying it, they're types of computers and computer programs that are built to work like the human brain. And you have synapses or whatever going back and forth that can learn activities, they can learn goals, and learn the best way to achieve those goals. And you can train an artificial intelligence, you can train a neural network on certain sets of data in order to make it really good at certain sets of tasks. For example, ChatGPT, probably the most famous example, was trained on a huge amount of text data. Apparently, a lot of it coming from Reddit, to our understanding, but definitely other websites.
I don't know if that should. I feel like that should worry us a little bit.
For real.
Right.
I did not know that.
So all over the internet, and it learns how people speak to each other. It learns generally true things and generally false things, learns how to tell a story and communicate. And now you can just talk to ChatGPT, and the wealth of information it is learned from reading the internet, in the same way that we have information that we've learned reading the internet, it can spit back out to you and have a conversation. Another example are image generation bots. Midjourney is an incredibly powerful one. Stable Diffusion is a very popular one. Was not Wall-E. I forget what it is. Dolly 2 is another really big one. It's supposed to be like Dolly, like the painter, and Wall-E, like the movie. So it's mixed together, right?
Yeah, nice.
So those are ones that have been trained on images where it sort of recognizes what's in the image. They're like, oh, that's a photo of a lion. Oh, that's a photo of a bear. Oh, that's whatever. I'm not going to finish it. And then eventually is asked to create with pixels images of a lion, images of a bear, or whatever. And eventually it's got extremely good at it. To the point of where I've used both tools extensively. If you've seen perhaps an image of the three of us walking towards the camera in a suit in promotion for this podcast, other than our heads and the graphics, that is entirely AI generated from beginning to end.
I mean, our hands are not that beefy, so
no,
for what
I
it's
had
worth.
Trouble with the hands. I was having a little bit of
AI has a lot of trouble with the hands so far.
Yes, it does. It'll get better. It's definitely, improving. So these sorts of tools exist, and I'm just talking about the ones that perhaps are more relevant to my field, but generating copy, generating images to be used in there. But there already exist AI tools, even in the world of audio, that will take audio that has nasty sound in the background, that has a bad EQ or whatever.
I love that tool.
Clean it up and just fix it.
It's not perfect, but man, oh man, it's powerful.
It gets you 90% of the way there. It saves you time.
So there does exist in our world the realistic version of artificial intelligence. Yes. Some version of early, like we've heard stories about. I mean, even like the military is currently experimenting with artificial intelligence for their drones and that kind of stuff, which is a whole different topic that's probably kind of problematic. Sure. But for generally speaking, for the AI that we're talking about, it's a lot less of a large Skynet scale. It's more of a tool, a resource, an item that can be used to help our workload. But it can also, we are already seeing it replace or fill out people's jobs, right? Both things can exist as real statements.
Right.
While it's not Skynet, it is currently hurting people in a real time.
Yeah. I saw a comic about it once, so it's kind of funny how when we think of automation taking over, we'd expect it to take over the factories and the farms and all that stuff, but it actually took the white-collar jobs. It took over the creatives and the data analysts and all of that kind of stuff first, which is not, I think, what anybody was expecting. But it's here, and it's something we got to figure out what we're going to do with it.
Yeah. So it's here. So let's break this down. Maybe we can do some pros about AI as we've kind of defined it now, what we're talking about. Maybe some pros and some cons, and then maybe we could talk about some personal feelings as we've tapped into throughout. So
sure.
AI, in this context, what do you guys see are some pros of it? And Caleb, I think you already touched on some of those.
Yeah. There's so many. It's real cool. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I was gonna say, we look back on history on inventions like the printing press, right? Yep. And the iPhone, because that's history now.
I think you could even look back to Photoshop.
Sure, Photoshop. All those things are tools that changed the industry that they're in for the better. I would say it's a generalization, but 90% of those tools, if not more, made it better. It certainly changed how things were done. But we can sit here and go, get off my lawn, right? I don't want Photoshop generating stuff instead, and instead of me creating it, right? But I think if we can use those tools, a better hammer is a faster hammer. It makes the nails go in quicker and more efficiently. Why wouldn't we want to hold on to those tools and learn them?
Yeah, it has absolutely made me faster at my job. Whenever I'm doing web development work, it can write code, and so if there's something I don't know how to do, obviously I can Google it, look on Stack Overflow or something, or I could just say, hey, can you write some code that does this? And 9 times out of 10, it just works, right? Yeah. Even copy for either ads that I'm doing, for websites that I'm doing. And then obviously Midjourney, being able to generate images out of the air instead of paying for something on iStock or whatever. I'll just invent exactly what I'm looking for. And it's not perfect. Usually takes some touch up. Unfortunately, I had the experience in Photoshop to be able to touch it up. But that's not going to be necessary eventually. Eventually, it's going to be good enough to where you don't need to touch it up. It's just good enough.
Yeah. So some of the things that we've already touched on this today, we have audio editing tools to help you refine audio enhancements. We've got content generators, so text. We've got, Caleb, you just said use it for web. We've got ChatGPT, which can help you write copy, which can help you write emails. We're seeing in so many of these, even the NLEs, what we started the conversation with, we're seeing tools that are helping quickly generate content, subtitles, helping you edit your video faster, find the moments in the video that can be taken out. They can help line up things. They can help streamline content. You even see a lot of, I don't know how much you guys are seeing these videos on Instagram. Sometimes we'll send them to each other. You can type in the B-roll that you want placed over a certain part of the video, or you can tell it to analyze the content of the video as it perceives it, and then tell it to fill in things. Or if you want to use it as a learning tool, you can you can input those kind of things and allow it to help you generate your own ideas. It can storyboard. So these are all tools, and I think that's a key word. These are all tools that if we are active and proactive about it, we can lean into them and allow them to help us.
I wonder how long until you're going to be able to buy a soundboard that can listen to inputs and mix itself, right? Based on whatever is happening and who's talking.
Yeah. We won't have to do all the work we did for the podcast to get all our silvery voices the way they are. We'll just start talking, and AI will regenerate our audio.
So
Blackbar.ai.
That I think feeds right into the cons then. That we got someone that have I paid him? I need to pay him. I'm going to pay someone for the work they did to
I hope he's watching this right now.
Dane, I'm sorry. I love you. I'll pay you right after this.
Here, we're giving some self promo here. Dane
Casperson
is amazing.
But if such a tool existed to where automatically be able to set our plugin settings or whatever, I didn't have to pay him to do that anymore, right? That's a job that's gone. And obviously that's a very small example, but I think you'd be crazy not to see the impending doom coming for the specific skills that we have learned to be able to generate manually. Now anybody can do automatically. It's a very realistic thing that I've even seen pastors having the conversation, like, is there AI that I can use to generate flyers from me so I don't have to pay someone to do it anymore, right? Those are jobs that are disappearing. Video, like Zach was already talking, videos that can automatically cut itself, insert B-roll into itself. Yeah, they still for now have to set up the camera, but like how long until that's not necessary anymore? It's coming.
John Mark Clark in the comments was just telling us that they already have an audio mic mixer. It's not quite AI, but it's smart tech. That can't be that far away.
No. So pros and cons, there are plenty, a long list of both. What do you do about it? So I guess there's maybe a handful of different approaches. There's abstinence, right? You say AI is a scary tool.
It's not a word that I thought you were going to go with.
Right? Yeah, it makes sense. No. How do you feel about AI? I'm abstinent from it. I'm staying abstinent. AI.
We haven't taken the next step yet.
What was that book?
In Marriage, of course. In Marriage,
goodbye. I kissed AI goodbye.
Right.
No.
So there are people who are refusing to use AI at all because of the moral implications of people losing their job. Obviously, the actors and the writers that we were just talking about also having the same problem. There are people that will use it casually, occasionally, to either ask ChatGPT a fun question instead of Googling it.
I hate to say sometimes those social media things where you make your face look like a Disney character.
Yes,
that's a form of this. Just worth saying.
Definitely. Stuff like that. And then the third step is going to be the people who are learning AI and learning how to use it properly, getting into Midjourney, figuring out what prompts generate the thing.
Right.
People who are figuring out Auto GPT and figuring out how to automate, those tools to be able to interact with the internet and do stuff for you automatically. To me, those are the three sort of ways in which you can interact with AI. And I definitely have a recommendation for the listeners of this podcast, which group you should be in.
But Caleb, just to clarify, summarize the top three again. So you said abstain entirely, learn it, and what's the other one?
Well, don't use it, understand it is how I would maybe separate.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think if you're in our fields and you're not in the third group, You're not going to be in our field in 5 years.
That's
the cold
absolutely.
way of saying it, but I think that's the truth.
But it's so true. I mean, like, to go back to that earlier example where I mentioned, like, the printing press, right? There was a bunch of people whose job it was to write and be copiers, right? In the old day, they would just write and copy. You know, those jobs went away. There's no way you can say that without saying that truth, right?
Yeah.
But there are other opportunities within the printing press world that I'm sure that gosh, I don't know if I love how I'm phrasing this.
Yeah.
There is a way to readapt your skills and stay in the industry.
There are still present day copywriters that do it in a very traditional way. Yeah.
Right. But I think that the disconnect with this example is that the old time individuals have less resources than we do to learn that new trade very quickly, right? We can look at AI, have access to the AI, and learn how to use it to continue what we're doing. Someone who was writing way back during, just as calligraphist or whatever, and suddenly printing press, their job's gone. Or is it going to have the opportunity to go to the local printing press place and just be like, hey, can I have a job?
We do. I
think
Stable Diffusion is one of the image generation AI systems. You can install that and run that entirely locally on your computer and mess with the AI model and switch all settings. You can learn that thing inside and out. That's going to be an invaluable experience as opposed to before, like you were talking about. I think the way that I think about it is like, again, this is a comic that I saw on the internet, but a couple of horses talking in like the 1910s to each other. And one of them's, they're looking at a car driving across the road. And one of them's worried about like, that car's going to take all of our jobs. And the other horse looks at him and says, no, don't worry. They're going to come up with better, easier jobs for us now. Which that didn't happen. That's not how it's going to work. Like it or not, we live in a capitalist society. And if AI could be used to reduce the operating costs of the owners of the business, that's what's going to happen.
Sure.
So
I have a couple of quick, like, disjointed thoughts. First, if you don't mind, I'm going to dance a little bit with one of your earlier ideas. You said, I think it was a generalization that you said about in 10 years, something AI will be replacing our roles. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think for better or for worse, churches have always been behind the curve on technology usage. So it's not great, but it might, I think it might save us in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of denominations and churches that we're starting to see their opinion strongly feel that this is not something that churches or faith or believers should at all embrace. So I think that's always going to be reality in this field. So I think first of all, that's not trying to say that is a negative thing. I think that's a reality that we see that will always secure some element of this.
I'd be curious, before you move on to another point, why don't they like it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this starts to become like the weird philosophical argument.
Yeah, we're starting to get into theology.
This is getting into okay.
Look, Caleb. Here's the thing: the mark of the beast is absolutely going to be AI. Okay,
right,
Satan's going to operate AI, and So
are you leaving? So like let's just fly into that point for a minute. Scott, who's in our comments, he was saying something along the lines of even for like sermons and people that are leading, we should always recognize when the Holy Spirit is evident in something that's God inspired. So in the current conception of AI, that it does not have a soul, right? So we will be able to recognize when something does not coincide.
Don't look. Save it for the next podcast.
No, I got something to say.
We can dive into it. But I want to make sure we're staying on track. So far, we should be able to experience the Holy Spirit in the physical manifestation of someone using their gifts in this field. So AI, in and of itself, doesn't have access to that. Now, the argument can be made for someone who's
something. Can I say something?
Yeah, let me finish. The argument that can be made for someone who's spirit-driven, who's spirit-empowered, to use AI in a spirit-inspired way. Go ahead, Caleb.
I believe that God can use Nick to speak to me. And I believe that God can use nature to speak to me, right? Do I believe that my God can't use AI to also
blasphemy?
Right? I'm just saying. Are we just ruling that out as a tool that that can be used?
Yeah.
So like you could ask AI to write sermons. I've done it several times. It's pretty good stuff. Like, I don't know if it's 10 out of 10 work, but it's as to my understanding of biblical accuracy and whatever. Like, it's good. It's definitely usable. Are we going to say that anything that it spits out, like you should? And this is a blanket thing. Always double check the sources and everything AI says. It is often incorrect about things.
Double check our sources as well. We're not even AI, and you should double check our sources.
If you are trusting it wholesale with the answers it's giving you, you're using AI improperly, at least for now. And might get better at that in the future. But you could say that the same about any individual pastor that would get up on that stage as well. So I don't know. Like,
I guess the point that I'm trying to make in defense of people that are anti-AI is that it's very easy to draw a line in which they're automatically saying that that's not a reality. So there's an automatic disagreement with your stance, Caleb, that automatically will cut off people from never touching the stuff, even if they accidentally do in small, weird use cases. Because I do think this AI as a tool, as a function, will be continued to use in all the things that we are using in a daily life. The extent of how much it is actually artificial intelligence is going to be argued, but I think on purpose they're saying this is where we're drawing a line in the sand, and they're not interested in crossing that. So that's, I guess, my defense for them. So I appreciate your counterpoint.
I understand.
Yeah,
that would be
Zachary. Zachary, so let me just make sure I'm hearing this right. You're saying there are churches and church leaders who are saying don't even touch AI?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've seen throughout comments in different spaces, different places, there is a lot of argument that people are just trying to, out the gate, they're saying anything that is AI is not something we're going to allow in our spaces. I think that is something we're already seeing.
Yeah.
I think it reminds me of what are the three attitudes towards new media and stuff that we've talked about in the past on Blackbar.
Zach, you were the one who came up with this. The
oh my gosh,
I can't remember.
It's been so
the innovators,
long.
I know. The
innovators. There we go.
And the
traditionalists. Yeah, innovators, adapters, and traditionalists. Yeah.
So this is not necessarily a new sentiment. In the same way that there are people who hate the fact that Photoshop exists.
Yes, for sure.
And the people who don't use computer. They're people who hate Google, right? Certainly those people will exist, and I guess I hope that over time we can encourage those people that these tools are not evil. They can be used for evil means.
Yeah,
I guess it's worth stating. Any of the tools that we talked about, there is absolutely immoral use cases for any of and all of these. But you could do the same thing with a car or with a hammer.
Yeah.
Does that mean that there should be there should be legislation around you can use these tools? No question. But whether or not they should exist, I feel like that's a losing argument.
If you don't mind me circling back to those disconnected thoughts, one of them spawned this one. So one, there is a reality that churches are completely rejecting it, which is fine. I think there's also a reality that every single person has to decide how they feel about this, which, I mean, that's a general, I mean, that's something that happens in life anyway. You got to figure out what your stance on something is. I think that what we have to be careful about, and I think you've seen, especially in technology spaces, not just church technology, but you see the in 50 years when the editing software has changed, it could be really easy for me to say, no, I want to stick with Final Cut, these newfangled editing softwares. There's a very real thing that people in the traditional sense of media have always drugged their feet on new technology because it's against what they know. And I think that's a wrong stance to take when it comes to this. I think you should make yourself aware and develop boundaries. And that's kind of the big point that I want to make on AI is what are your boundaries and why are you using AI? I think those are two big questions that every single church has to ask that's interested in looking into this field. Because if you don't know those things, we're already asking those questions for social media. We're already asking those questions for media within churches. You're asking those questions for the different, churches are splitting because they are not on the same page about the type of worship. This is one more thing to add to the list of why are you deciding to use it, and then what are the boundaries that are coming with it. Fog machines is a really big topic that is easy to poo-poo on because people argue that fog machines shouldn't be in churches. And I think the larger question is why is it being used, and then what are the boundaries to it being used? Because I think in each of these topics, you can go too far. You can go too far in these areas. So with AI, you can go too far in its use in your church. But before you get to that point, right now, are you figuring out, whether it's in yourself or in your leadership, in your pastoral team, what are the boundaries and what is the necessity to use that? So I think those are big questions to ask in this topic. So,
yeah, I think if I can bring up an example, it might be worth talking about. And I know he was in the chat earlier. I don't know if he is right now, but I had a conversation over text like a month or two ago with a mutual friend of the show, Alex, who I'm not going to use your last name, Alex, if you're in here, because I don't know. I don't know if you want me to, but but he works in church media, and his department was in charge of writing an article surrounding a missionary who was overseas in a restricted country. Like,
and maybe just keep the denomination out of it too.
Yep. They kill you if they find out you're a Christian, sort of deal. And there was an article, an interview, the whole thing. And at the top of the article, instead of using an image of the missionary, they used an AI generated image of a woman that doesn't exist, looking like she's standing in a location that could be perceived as the country that she's in, right? And the question was, like, is this a moral use of artificial intelligence? Because the article is also going to be sent out to a bunch of people that they're hoping are going to donate to the missions program and blah blah blah. And we had a long conversation about it. And I think there's so many pros and cons. When I think, like, obviously, yes, you're keeping the missionary safe. That is totally a good thing and worth it.
Yeah.
B, if by pure happenstance, that AI generated image of that woman looks kind of like someone who just happens to be in that state or in that country,
right?
You could cause a lot of problems for them really quick. And hopefully with, a certain amount of conversation, they can figure it out. But it is feasibly a problem that you would not be able to control. And then I think the third thing to consider is, technically speaking, this is a piece of media that is being created with the express purpose of hopefully emotionally moving someone to be able to give to the cause that is being put forth. So by you using an image that is not real, is that being dishonest in your delivery of that information? And obviously that's a little bit tricky, because like I could take a real image and then Photoshop it a little bit, and okay, that's technically not real, but it's a bit grayer, and as opposed to a completely brand new image right off, off the presses. So there's so many things to think about there. And I'm curious, I came to a point where I found a spot that felt good. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts in this, where you would put the boundaries in this kind of situation.
Zach, you want to go first on this one, or?
Well, I'm just kind of chewing on the idea of like, let's change the parameters of this situation and say we're no longer worried about the safety and identity of this family, of this missionary. If I am in, I don't know, if I'm in California and I am AI generating images of my content of my church to bring people into a service, like, does that change the landscape? Like, I feel like what a missionary has going for it that's special than other conversations is that there's a sensitivity and a necessity to protect the safety of this family while also supporting them. But if we were to use it in a different context in which that's not the case, I feel like I'm still chewing on whether or not I would feel the same about that situation.
Do the ends justify the means?
Exactly.
In this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Nick, do you have a thought?
There's something that we talked about a long time ago. I mean, literally when we were in college, where like we were talking about like when we market for churches, right? And one of the ethical lines we came to was like, whatever we do, whatever we like create, it has to be true in a sense, right? Like we don't, and this has come back to some projects we worked over time. We don't want to create something that sets false expectations, right? And I think I remember talking to somebody, and I hope I wasn't going to stream this up because that'd be awful if it was, but like someone was telling me that they were using, a very, very small church was using AI generated imagery to create like what on their website would look like a really big church and all these other things. And so like that for me is an obvious line that you can't cross.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
There's that phrase that's thrown around sometimes when like in congressional hearings for like what is pornography, right? I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I can tell you when I see it. Right?
Sure.
Like there's a very wide gray line of this, but you know, that case of that church is an obviously crossed line.
Yeah.
You know, if you're telling people you have a giant cathedral and they show up and it's a little, you know, park mall, like building in a small mall or whatever, that's a lie. You're lying to people, and that's wrong.
It's a problem. So, Caleb, why don't you say your opinion, and then maybe I'll help land us today, because I think my opinion's less specific than yours. So,
I think personally, it comes down to disclosure. I think there's nothing wrong with using that image if in the caption of that image you state that it is an AI generated image. At that point,
I like that.
The person who was in the photo obviously stays protected because no one knows who they are. If somehow the authorities of that country get a hold of that photo and see the caption, well, they're not going to go after anybody if they know it's AI generated, right? And even being honest with the people, and you could even say this photo is AI generated to protect the identity of the person in question. Like, no one's going to think twice about it. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a cool
that already feels better, to be honest.
Yes, it does. Better.
I think in as many cases as we can, when we could be open and honest, when we're using these tools to dispel, like we were just a little bit ago about the Blackbar ad was us in the 3 suits, right? I'm not going to pretend like that was an AI generated image. When we can be honest in these situations and be clear and be transparent, something that church isn't always fantastic at being, I think that we're going to win more points in this sort of slow march towards the acceptance of AI.
I like that idea. Really like that.
Thanks. I thought about it a lot.
Clearly.
Caleb was just sitting in his bed. Oh man, how
a little bit.
Yeah.
So this might be very Enneagram 2 of me. I think I'm in a position right now as AI is emerging that I'm not going to fault someone for completely abstaining. I'm not going to fault someone I'm not going to fault someone who is using AI in a morally obligated way as a tool. And I'm also not going to fault someone that's going to use it to help make the lives and the experiences of their coworkers better, which is not something we touched on too much. Like, if I am in a small church and I am the sole video guy, and it is my responsibility to write the church's marketing emails, and I hate it, I have no problem with someone using ChatGPT to help streamline their work in that way. However, where I do have problems is whenever it crosses that boundary, it starts to take people's jobs. It starts to take people's. It starts to give people. Starts to lose the mission of the organization that's using it. That's where I see the line is drawn. So
for sure.
Not to say I am on board with everyone using it, but that'd be my stance, because I personally probably use it the least out of the 3 of us. And I have friends who are very, very against it. Especially, I have traditional artist friends who have seen Midjourney. They've lost jobs because of Midjourney existed. They just did, and I think that's something that we have to be very careful and very aware of. So, those are some thoughts. Again, as you leave, just make sure you know exactly why you're using it, and then also set up boundaries to determine what is the best way to use it in a moral way, in a Christ-like way, in a Spirit-filled way. Because I think all those things, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive, but I do think they take intentionality to determine that.
And use it to write your D&D campaigns. It's really
exactly. There you go. Generate your D&D images with Midjourney. No, just kidding. So we are reaching the end of episode 1 of Blackbar Podcast Season 2. Guys, do you have any closing thoughts today as we kind of conclude all the things that we discussed in this space?
There were way less technical problems than I expected there to be today.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, we had a few.
We had
some.
I took some notes. I got to look into it. But
it's amazing how many more frames my camera sends when it doesn't have DaVinci open.
Yes, there's a little symbol on my back end that tells me that your CPU is overheating like crazy. It has been this whole time.
Seriously?
So maybe we need to have a conversation about that.
Cool. Yeah.
So I get to close it out, of course, all the normal YouTube things. Definitely like, comment, share this news short with your friends if you found it helpful. We're going to be up doing this at this point every other week. Fridays at noon. We'll see how that schedule works. Maybe it'll change in the future. But
do you have a little social media or Discord thing for the lower third?
Hit us up on Discord at discord.blk.bar to chat with us and a bunch of other people that are in the same fields and dealing with the same problems that you are. And as was stated earlier, if you're interested in having us join your team and help you with a big project, you can hit us up at blk.bar for all of your general media and
we may or may not use AI for your project, depending on your needs.
We'll let you know what we do. We'll let you know.
We'll let you know.
Cool. All right, I think that's it. I guess we'll see y'all in a couple weeks or on the Discord.
Yes, sir.
Bye.